What's up, fight fans? It's Amir Washington back with another episode of Pardon the F-Bomb. First and foremost, let's do all the housekeeping as we have to in the beginning. Hit that notification button, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the unlike button. However you feel about me, however you feel about the channel, please, have that activity that helps us either way you look at it. Rocking a new Pardon the F-Bomb t-shirt. You can get that at teespring.com/store/pardon the F-Bomb. Hyphen in between each one of those words / letters. There's also a link in the description so that you can head over there and support the channel. This will help the growth of the channel. I don't think I'm going to get rich right away, but we'll give it a shot. But either way, this video is all about Chris Weidman saying in an interview with SB Nation that he could beat Jon Jones or would like to be the person to upset Jon Jones at light heavyweight. And I immediately posted to my Instagram, Pardon the F-Bomb, Chris Weidman has to be on drugs to think that, he can pull that off. And I know who Chris Weidman is, okay? Chris Weidman is a former middleweight champion. Chris Weidman is the guy who knocked out Anderson Silva. So let's start there, right? When Weidman knocked out Anderson Silva back in 2013, he was a lot younger. Anderson was still considered to be probably the pound-for-pound best, greatest of all time at that time. Still is one of the best, one of the pound-for-pound best of all time. But, he played with Weidman like he played with everybody else. And this isn't anything new or wasn't anything new for Anderson Silva. He had done it to everyone and pretty much always figured out a way to win. He happened to do it too much or he wasn't careful enough, and Weidman caught him with a good hook, dropped him, got some top shots, some ground and pound on him, and he finished the fight and became the middleweight champion. All well and good. They fight again. Weidman does his homework. His coaches do their homework. Anderson Silva throws a kick, happens to get a check, hits just the right way for him to break his leg. And we all know the history from there. So, no disrespect to what Weidman was able to accomplish. Anybody who's able to knock out or beat Anderson Silva at that time, has to be respected, has to be given their props. Also, Weidman was undefeated, and he also beat Lyoto Machida, who I think only had 2 losses to Jon Jones and Mauricio Shogun, who at the time, and then he beat Vitor Belfort, who's always been a beast of the light heavyweight and middleweight division. So respect, hats off to what Weidman was able to accomplish. And he's got some other names under his belt. It was alluded earlier on in his career and their careers in certain aspects. So we won't make too much of that. He's a good fighter. He's a solid fighter. He beat Anderson Silva twice. One was in no contest with the broken leg and everything. Well, not no contest, but the man couldn't continue. But when I think about that, when I look at that, with just that, it's not like he dominated Anderson Silva. It's not like he was in there just giving Anderson so many problems where Anderson couldn't defend himself and he happened to just overwhelm him and then knock him out. And then the second fight, I think it was maybe the second round. Let me just look over here really quickly at what the round was, because I got Weidman and Jon Jones's records up on the internet, so I can just make sure that I'm accurate with everything. But it was the second round, like I thought. So the second round, Anderson Silva breaks his leg. In the first fight, it was also the second round. So it wasn't like he got a lot of rounds on Anderson Silva. And after the victories against Lyoto Machida and Vitor Belfort, he gets knocked out by Luke Rockhold, and then he gets knocked out again by Yoel Romero. He gets TKO'd by Gegard Mousasi, who's a beast. I love Gegard. He's one of my favorite fighters. He pulls off a win against Kevin Gastelum, and then he gets knocked out again by Ronaldo Souza. And I just want to be accurate, and that's why I'm looking over to make sure I got the order right. So in Chris Weidman's last 5 fights, he got knocked out 4 times. He only has 1 victory, which was by submission. He's a good wrestler, good jiu-jitsu. He has a strong, punches. All respect to him. But dude, you are walking into the light heavyweight division for the first time against Dominick Reyes. Take care of Reyes first, and then beat a top fiver, and then talk about, upsetting Jon Jones the way you did Anderson Silva. Again, 6 years ago, dude, you were 29 years old when you beat Anderson Silva. You're no spring chicken by fight standards. And I'm talking directly to Chris Weidman because, okay, yes, SB Nation had a comment in there that Jones doesn't finish fights the way he used to. The man's 32 years old. He was on a tear, through his first 20 fights. He had some adversity. But if you look at his last 4 fights, we're talking about DC, we're talking about Anthony Smith, we're talking about Thiago Santos, a.k.a. Moretta, and we're talking about Ovince St. Preux, okay? Now, I know that the the kick to the head and ultimately finishing Daniel Cormier against the cage was a no contest with the whole steroid thing. But that's a finish. He also recently finished Alexander Gustafsson. Got him on the ground, took him down, top position, rained down some punches. He beat this man in 3 rounds. And this was the guy who, for the first time, showed any chink in Jon Jones' armor. Right? So everybody, when that fight happened, Jon Jones had beaten Rashad Evans, he had beaten Mauricio Shogun Rua, Lyoto Machida, Quentin Rampage Jackson, and everybody else under the sun in the light heavyweight division on his march to being one of the most decorated champions in UFC history, considered by many to be the greatest of all time, bar none, right? So he had some adversity. I thought he won the fight 3-2. I didn't think Alex did enough to take the title from him. I don't think he did enough to prove that he was champion. And when the rematch came, we saw that Jon Jones made a correction, made the adjustments, and Alexander Gustafsson could barely touch him. When Jon Jones went out the first time, after he fought Daniel Cormier, he came back in between that to kind of warm up before Ovince St. Preux, who was knocking people out, who was a big, strong contender. He was ranked number 6, and Jon Jones beat him. Now, he didn't finish him. He beat him convincingly, and then gets in trouble again. He has the fight with DC, gets in trouble. Fine, all well and good. He comes back, and he beats Anthony Smith, right? And Anthony Smith is not. I think he beat Thiago Santos in their fight, if I'm remembering my history right. And then Jon Jones has a fight with Thiago Santos, and he beats him. Now, that fight, I would love to see a do-over for Santos, largely because, he did hurt his knee, tweaked his knee in the fight, and I think he's, may have gotten surgery already and is on his way to recuperating. But these 2 guys are young warriors, and if Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier weren't in a division, it's likely that they would have been fighting for the light heavyweight championship. These aren't pushover guys. These are just guys who happen to run up against one of the best fighters of all time, some who consider him to be the best fighter of all time. I do. Jon Jones is my favorite fighter, bar none. Evan Tanner is a really close second, and we won't get too deep into that. But I think Chris Weidman needs to show us and the UFC that he can win a fight at light heavyweight. Before you call Jon Jones out and talking about, shocking the world, which would be incredible for your career, right? You'd be the guy who beat Anderson Silva, who beat Jon Jones. But you have 4 losses and 1 victory in your last 5 fights since you beat Vitor Belfort. You lost your title. You never got it back. You lost 2 consecutive fights by KO after you lost your title by KO. Then you won a fight, and then you got KO'd again. This isn't a formula to put you in line to be the next guy if you happen to beat Dominick Reyes. It's just not. I think people have to remember what happens to people, and this is why I want to highlight Jon Jones' career and kind of go through his record and what has happened, right? Whether you think he is a cheater and he uses steroids all the time, or he happened to use steroids that 1 or 2 times, dealing with Daniel Cormier, whatever the case might be, you look at his record, it's a who's who of light heavyweight champions, who's who of light heavyweight top 5 contenders. He's beaten them all. No one has found the formula to ultimately beat Jon Jones. In his last 2 fights, Anthony Smith is a hard puncher, but he was barely able to let his hands go in that fight because Jon Jones befuddled him that much. Whatever his response was to the media, and I listened to the press conference, it wasn't that he was this or it wasn't that he was that. Whatever it was, he didn't do anything to take the title. He was backing up. Jon was trying to press the action to try to get the finish from what I saw and what I remember, but he did not want to engage Jon Jones. I don't think he could solve the problem, solve the puzzle that is Jon Jones. Now, Beretta had more success, and he was a little more trigger happy with throwing hard punches, and I think he caught Jon with some really good shots that made Jon think, I need to take my time with this guy, make sure that I'm not going to do anything stupid and get knocked out. I agree with Chris Weidman, and I agree with Miyamoto Musashi, who says no man is invincible. Yes, Jon Jones can be beaten. Vitor Belfort almost beat Jon Jones with an armbar, from his back. The man is not invincible. No man is invincible. But what Jon Jones is always prepared. I have never seen him come into a fight, steroids or not, whether he was getting accused of using, whether he was not getting accused of using. I've never seen him come into a fight and look physically out of shape and look like he couldn't go the full 5 rounds. You got to remember, this guy's been going, 5 rounds since he won the title back in. Let me get the date really quickly just to get this thing right, okay? Shogun Rua. This was 2011. So Jon Jones has basically every fight since he fought Shogun for his 14th fight, or yeah, his 14th fight to win the title. He has been going 5 rounds. He has never looked totally gassed. Now, Daniel Cormier had a pretty good war in the first fight. I think the second fight went 3 or 4 rounds. He's had some decision victories. He's had some knockout finishes, ground and pound. He has some submissions. But he's always prepared. He's always in shape. He comes ready to fight, and he does his best, whatever that might be. Excuse me, there's a helicopter in the background. But, every fighter, every great fighter who has a career as long as Jon Jones or longer has this kind of run. Guys are young, guys are fresh, they're full of energy, they don't have a lot of wear and tear in their body, they're not fighting high-intensity fights in terms of the spotlight or the fights being like these big things under the big lights, and they're able to knock guys out, finish guys fast, show that, they're on a tear, and they're young, hungry lions. And then over time, what happens is guys start to prepare for that level of competition. Daniel Cormier, the first fight was pretty much a wash. Jon beat him 4-1 as far as I'm concerned. And then in the second fight, even though, let's say Jon flat out, he used steroids, he knew it, he was all juiced up, Daniel Cormier fought a better fight the second time. And no other light heavyweight was able to beat Daniel Cormier in the light heavyweight division. And then he went up to heavyweight and knocked out Stipe Miocic. And then he got knocked out. And so this is the fight, and I want to talk about that later on in another video that Daniel Cormier wants. I don't think he even cares about the Jon Jones trilogy anymore as much, because now he's got this thing that he can pull off with Stipe, and I think all of us would love to see it. But with the exception of Stipe, no heavyweight had been able to beat Daniel Cormier up until a couple months ago, or I don't even know if it was a couple months ago now. I think it was maybe 4 weeks. And no light heavyweight, with the exception of Jon Jones, could beat Daniel Cormier. And everyone had to raise their game to Jon, right, in the light heavyweight division. So to people saying, oh, yeah, he can be beaten, I'm seeing things. Yeah, we're all seeing things. We've got over 25 fights that Jon has been in that you can look at the tape, you can read what he's doing, get your coach to read what he's doing. There's a lot more information to try to figure him out. Now, the progression that Jon had was incredible, right? The guy goes 12-1, pretty much 13-0. I mean, those 12-6 elbows were disqualification. No one has beat Jon Jones in the octagon. You start to slow down. You have less fights during the year. You're seeing one guy, you're preparing for one guy at a time. You're getting older, you're going through whatever he was going through with the steroids, with his own personal life, with the drug abuse, and he's not a young, fresh, hungry lion. He's an old lion trying to hold on to his kingdom. So he's going to be a little more careful. In general, he's going to have, he's going to take more time to kind of let the fight develop to see who these younger guys are, how much energy they have. They can probably go quicker and faster than he can in most instances. But for Weidman to think, with no light heavyweight resume, with 3 consecutive knockout losses, from his title until he fought Kevin Gastelum, and then getting knocked out again, to even utter Jon Jones's name. Like, oh, yeah, and I get it, right? It's always, this is a fight game, this is a money game, it's a business, it's marketing, it's advertising, it's putting yourself in a position. And if he has an incredible, shocking victory against Dominick, maybe he gets the nod. But I don't think so, right? I think there's Daniel Cormier, Anthony Rumble might even come back. I think he's only really got recorded losses, at the end of his career. He was close to the heavyweight championship against Daniel Cormier. I think he knocked out Alexander Gustafsson. He may come back. There's Anthony Smith. There's a rematch there potentially. There's Thiago Santos. There's potential fights at heavyweight for Jon Jones. There are other guys who deserve it more at light heavyweight than Chris Weidman. He has not even been able to regain his own middleweight title after, what some people call kind of a fluke victory. 2 fluke victories against Anderson Silva. Now, again, all respect. Guys who get in there in the octagon or in the boxing ring or in any kind of combat sport where it's full contact, no protective gear, I respect everything that they do. I respect all the preparation that goes into having to get into the octagon and face another man who's trying to hurt you. But when people talk about Jon Jones, I think there needs to be a little bit more respect of his resume. Mauricio Shogun Hua, Lyoto Machida, Chael Sonnen, Daniel Cormier, Alexander Gustafsson, Quentin Rampage Jackson, Rashad Evans, the list goes on and on. Ryan Bader. I mean, come on. I mean, the guy has literally looked better than everyone. He's 32 years old now, right? So the likelihood that he's going to lose the longer he fights increases. Randy Couture, as he continued to fight on into his late 30s and early 40s, took a little more lumps. The knockout, karate kick to the chin against Lyoto Machida. I think it was the loss to Brock Lesnar and all these things. They happen, right? The longer John fights, the likelihood that he's going to get hurt or knocked out or submitted increases. But again, Chris Weidman is no spring chicken. Chris Weidman is 35 years old. He's 1 year younger than I am. I just turned 36 in September. He's not a young man. He doesn't have a lot of MMA years ahead of him in terms of really being able to push the envelope and win championships and defend them multiple times. And it can happen. I don't want to discredit who he is. The quality of opposition that he's had has been good, but his resume of late isn't of a championship caliber. It's not somebody that I'm like, yeah, this is who Jon Jones' next opponent should be. The other downside to losing to Jon Jones, if you happen to fight him, is that he gets all of your record on his resume. Now he has the guy who beat Anderson Silva, he beats him. You know what I mean? The guy who beat Lyoto Machida, he gets a double victory. He gets a double victory against Vitor. He gets a Damian Maia victory. Just the downside to losing a fight like that, trying to go in there and just try to shock the world, is also a risk. The other thing is there has been no middleweight, none, to go up 20 pounds and have success in the light heavyweight division. And his knockout history recently in losses isn't something that I would be encouraging, quite frankly. And maybe it's the weight. And listening to him, the weight cutting is hard. I'm 36. I'm not a fighter. I don't fight for a living. I sit in the chair to earn my money. Weight cutting is hard, right? Cutting weight is difficult, and I'm sure it's difficult if your body's ready to be at a larger weight. It happens to all of us. As we age, it's harder to pull the weight off. Our metabolism starts to slow down if we're not constantly in the gym working out. So my hat's off to Chris Weidman for being confident. I mean, every fighter has to be confident. But Jon Jones is perceived to be unbeatable, not just because he can knock people out or because he has submissions or because his ground and pound is great. It's not just that. It's the preparation. It's the team around him. It's his own IQ. And people have to remember who he beat cleanly the first time was Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier was picking up and slamming and walking heavyweight guys around the ring, slamming them on their heads, slamming them on their necks, finishing them, knocking them out. Came to light heavyweight, beat every light heavyweight except Jon Jones. And then went up to heavyweight and knocked out the most successful champion the first time they fought. And had a good fight with him for a few rounds and they got knocked out. Heavyweights knock each other out all the time. That man is probably the second or third best fighter of all time, Daniel Cormier, bar none. Khabib, for me, is the only one that puts Daniel in second place right now, especially if Khabib continues to pad his resume with victories against high-quality opponents. But Daniel Cormier couldn't beat Jon Jones. Okay, Lyoto Machida was, I think, 15-1 when he fought Jon Jones. And he had only lost to Mauricio Shogunua. Okay, Mauricio was an animal, and Jon Jones mauled him. He had just beaten Lyoto Machida, who everybody thought couldn't be beat at the time. It's not that he's unbeatable, it's that the likelihood that you're going to win is very low because of his talent, his height, his reach advantage. He's not just tall, his reach is freaking 85 inches according to, the stat sheet that we see every time he fights. Weidman is 6'2", Gustafsson was 6'4", I think, too. He could look Jon Jones right in the eye, and he could barely touch the man. Anthony Smith was beating people up, knocking people out. He fought Moretta. They went hard at it, and he barely had anything to give. The only one who's given Jon any real serious trouble in my eyes, with the exception of Daniel Cormier, has been Thiago Santos up to this point. The man is a big, strong, light heavyweight, hard-hitting, both hands, explodes off. He has good defense. He was more settled than I expected based on what we saw, and he still couldn't beat him. Now, his knee got tweaked, and maybe the fight goes a different way if his knee didn't get tweaked. But you got to respect the man who every time he has to fight someone, he doesn't shy away from the opportunity, doesn't turn them down. He fought the best guys. The best three up-and-comers recently, Ovince St. Preux, Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos. Thiago's kind of old, but it's not like 22 or anything. But in terms of their place in the division, Jon fought these guys. So hats off to Chris Weidman. Good luck against Dominick Reyes. But dude, as far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as the rest of the MMA world is concerned, you can't beat Jon Jones. I think you need to beat Dominick Reyes and focus there. I don't think it's intelligent to be even thinking Jon Jones yet when you've been knocked out 4 times in your last 5 outings. If I got knocked out 4 times in my last 5 outings, I wouldn't be talking about Jon Jones, who no one has been able to solve, you know. And I don't think you hit as hard as Moretta. So again, thank you guys for watching. It's Amir Washington with Pardon the F-Bomb. Get your t-shirt at teespring.com/stores/pardon space, not space, dash the dash F dash bomb. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, stay tuned. Next up, we'll be talking about Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz. And then we'll be talking about Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya. I am so shocked, and I'm going to say it again in the next video. So shocked that this thing isn't getting the coverage that it deserves. 2 great fighters going at it next weekend, October 5th, in, I believe, Melbourne, Australia. So, check us out later. See you guys soon. Peace.